Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. I'm so excited you're here. Last week's podcast was great talking about fair play. There's so much that goes into that. And of course, we can't ever cover everything in the short segment that we have on here. But I'd love to dive into more of that with Vito on here sometime and kind of how we go about it and how we um, have our roles in the home. I would say we're probably a little bit more traditional, but also, as you can tell, like through listening to the podcast, like he helps out so much at home, and through being married for 5 years now, and I think just also our coaching backgrounds, like being able to communicate our needs and what the areas I guess that we need help in is so important. So definitely go back and listen to that. And of course, I'll have Vito on to talk more about that in the future because it's a conversation that we have a lot. But I'm really excited for today's episode. So it's a beautiful day here outside Chicago. We have had like 90-degree weather, super humid, and it is like 72, a perfect little breeze and just like sunshine here today, which is our optimal, which is my perfect weather. 70s is like my perfect weather. So I have the windows open in the shed where I'm recording right now. And so if you hear kids screaming outside or planes driving or flying over me, it's because the windows are open because it's so gorgeous. And my kids are playing outside. So just, you know, real life stuff here. This week's episode, I'm doing a solo episode and I'm going to be talking about epidurals mostly, but also what if the epidural isn't right for you? What if the epidural doesn't work for you? What if you don't get the chance to get an epidural because you have a really fast labor, but you were counting on it? So what do you do now? That's what this whole episode is about. I'm going to be sharing some resources with you, some other tips, some other tools, some stuff behind epidurals. So we'll just kind of dive right in. The research is kind of showing over 60% of women, I think it's even more than that, like closer to like 80-ish in the United States, get epidurals when they are in labor. So it's a very, very common thing that most women are using. And the reason being that it is a very effective way to manage pain in labor and delivery. So, what are, I guess, maybe some of the reasons that you might not be able to get one? And I've heard like so many random stories of people who, they were planning on getting this epidural and then their labor happened too quickly. I've been at these births. I had a friend who her first labor went exactly how she wanted. She went there, got the epidural. It worked great. She had her baby. Everything was beautiful. Her second, she planned the same thing. And her labor went so fast that they checked her. She was like 7 or 8 centimeters. They called for the epidural and she's sitting on the edge of the bed and they're like, we can't put in your epidural because you can't sit still. And she's like, because I'm pushing my baby out right now. So he just came way too fast. And for her, she wanted that epidural relief. This was not something she was planning. And so if you don't know your options or ways to manage pain or to cope or different positions you can get in, it can feel a little bit traumatizing. And she said that she felt definitely kind of traumatized and blindsided by this experience because she hadn't planned for anything else. I've also attended several births where the epidural wasn't working very efficiently. So about 15% of the time, the epidural's not going to work for you. So whether that is a pocket, we call it a little pocket. Sometimes you're numb everywhere, but there's just one area that you are feeling everything, which stinks, right? Like that's not what you're hoping for when you're signing up to get an epidural. And then there's some people that it just isn't that effective for. What's super interesting is that or random too, is that people with red hair, anesthesia tends to be less effective for. So if you fall into that category, maybe you're one of those people falling into the 15% of the time that the epidural is not working. There's other things to take into consideration. If you're at a smaller hospital and they only have one anesthesiologist and they're really busy and the anesthesiologist is stuck in an emergency cesarean. So when you're requesting your epidural, you're like, okay, I'm ready for this pain relief now. And they're like, okay, well, you're third on the list, or they're in a cesarean and we have two mamas in front of you waiting to get the epidural. So it's not always just what you're thinking in your head. Like, okay, I'm going to go into labor. When I feel like I need some help, when I feel like I can't manage as well anymore, I'm going to get an epidural. Hopefully, I'm hoping that that's the case if that's your plan, that you're able to get that relief. But that, like we're talking about today, that's not always what happens. Also, something that could affect whether you get an epidural or not is your platelet count. If it's not right, you might not be able to get it. If you have really low blood pressure, that could also be something to take into consideration. One of the side effects of getting an epidural is it lowers your blood pressure. They can give you medication to try to mitigate that, but that might not be a risk that they want to take if you're already experiencing extremely low blood pressure in labor. And so there's all sorts of reasons why it might not happen exactly the way that you want. Even for me, I got an epidural with my first labor, and then I chose not to with my next two. And in my first, I remember once I talked about getting an epidural at noon. I was like, okay, maybe I need an epidural, and I was like, no, I can keep going. And then around 5 p.m., I'm like, maybe I need an epidural. And then it was about 7 p.m. that I actually got it. So I started thinking about it at 5. By 7 o'clock, I was ready for it, but I hadn't had a bag of fluids. So I opted to labor without an IV. So I hadn't been receiving fluids. I'd been hydrating just on my own, taking sips of water between every contraction. And so I had to get a bag of fluids in me before I got the epidural. And then they were waiting for the anesthesiologist. So by the time I was like, okay, I'm ready for an epidural, it took about an hour. And I just remember that hour, my doula telling me like I was fixated on the clock because they were like, you have to receive this whole bag. And then they were like, then the anesthesiologist will be here in like half hour. And I was just staring at the clock, and she's like, you can't fixate on that clock of like when the epidural's coming. For me, it worked very, very effectively, almost too effectively. I actually didn't like how numb I was. Like a really good epidural, you should still be able to move your legs, but you're not feeling any pain. I couldn't move anything. I was paralyzed. Like they were trying to get me to like scooch. My leg just fell off the bed and I felt nothing. I couldn't feel any pressure to push with contractions. I felt nothing. So you don't necessarily want that, but I'm also very, very sensitive to drugs. So um, I remember when I got my wisdom teeth out when I was 21, the pain medicine that they sent me home with, I took it one night and I was like, oh, I was high as a kite. I was like, holy crap, I cannot take this pain medication. Like it was way too strong for me. So I've always been like really, really sensitive to those types of things. And like in an epidural, there is like fentanyls in it. So it is a very strong mix of narcotics that you are receiving. You don't feel high when you get an epidural, but those drugs are in your system. So I was completely, completely numb. So hopefully that's not your case. But if it is something that you're planning on getting, make sure that you're having open communication with the staff and with your provider, because another thing that you don't want to happen getting the epidural is it to slow your labor down. So I've seen two sides of the epidural. I've seen the epidural slow labor down. It can cause a stall. There's research to support that it can space out contractions for a while. It can cause a stall or cause a stall. And you really want to try to avoid that because a labor stall, or what they call failure to progress is the number one reason for cesareans. So you want to make sure that that's not going to happen. And then you're also more likely to be put on Pitocin, which is a whole nother story. If you didn't listen to my podcast with Gina Mundy talking about childbirth cases and how Pitocin is just involved in like a lot of negative outcomes, it's a great episode to reference. I have a ton of issues with Pitocin. It's a very misused, mismanaged drug. There are providers who use it great. So you can't lump everybody into this category, but then you're putting this thing on your body where you're slowing it down, then you're forcing it to progress. That's when you get fetal distress, which is the number 2 cause of cesarean. So you just want to make sure that you're not getting it way too early. However, if you're experiencing a lot of pain and that's what you're planning on doing, you just need to have other tools in your belt to make sure that labor is still progressing, and then have tools in your belt to make sure that if you're not able to get the epidural, that you can get through. So the other way that I've seen the epidural, like I said, it can cause a stall. I've also seen it do the opposite. So I've been at a lot of labors where I've seen mom being stuck at a 7 or an 8, and she's just really, really struggling. And she's not able to let her body open up in between or in contractions. When you have pain, you want to tense up, but in labor, you want to relax. Not even in labor, kind of in everything. When you tense up, you make it worse. So you want to relax and let your body open. And that is really hard to do if you're in a lot of discomfort. You're kind of fighting against your natural urge. But there's a difference between suffering and surrendering to the contraction. I learned that between my first and second labors. But I've seen it to where there's so much tension with the contraction and they're just almost fighting it, that getting an epidural actually allowed mom to relax and let her body open up. And then she was able to finish dilating. I've also seen it in a lot of cases where, let's say it was a home birth or a birth center transfer. I just want to say before I continue, most transfers from home birth or birth center birth are not emergent transfers. 96% of them are non-emergent. It's because mom wants some pain relief and some rest, or they're like, you know what, I think we just need a different approach. Like we need some more intervention here. So what it is a responsible use of resources. Okay, we exhausted our resources here. Maybe we need a different environment, some other tools that the hospital has to go there. So I've seen it with moms who they've been in labor for 2 days and they're just so exhausted. And in order to finish it out, they've opted to go to the hospital, get an epidural, get in a great nap and rest, and then be able to have the strength and energy to push their baby out. So you see, I'm in the birthy, natural, crunchy world. So I see so much of that like in my Instagram feed that talks about like an epidural is going to slow your labor down. It can affect the cascade of hormones that's going to flow in your body, which is absolutely true. But it's not also talked about like some of the positive sides of when mom really, really needs rest, when she really needs a break. When you are stuck and you're not dilating, then it's able to let you relax and open. And also your birth satisfaction. That's really, really important too. So taking into consideration your satisfaction of your birth, that you wanted a method of pain relief that was highly effective, you got it, it worked great for you. And that's really important. Birth satisfaction is so, so important. But a huge part of that birth satisfaction is going to be knowing your options, knowing the research behind it, knowing tools to have in your tool belt. So let's say you get the epidural, your labor slows down. What can you do about it? Movement is your friend. It's going to be your best friend. And you're like, wait, Liz, I just got an epidural. How can I do movement? laying side to side with a peanut ball between your legs is great. Rotate every 30 minutes. It's called side lying. You can do side lying release. You could do flying cowgirl. I know that some of these sound like sex positions, but they are great. I can attach to this podcast some like pain relief or positions you can do with an epidural. So changing positions is going to be huge. I've even been at births where I've been at a lot of births with an epidural where we're on all fours on the bed. They're on a peanut ball. They're using the squat bar. They're doing so many different positions with an epidural still. And we're just helping rotate the baby, helping contractions continue to be effective and keep moving. So movement is your key with preventing a labor stall. Another thing that you can request if they're like, hey, your contractions are spacing out, I think we should start Pitocin. Request a breast pump. So that's going to stimulate oxytocin. Nipple stimulation stimulates oxytocin, gets oxytocin flowing and contractions going. And so requesting a breast pump is a great tool to use. And you might use it for a little bit and then have some contractions pick up, get back in the rhythm of it, then they might space back out when you stop. So then I would do it every hour for several hours for like 20 minutes and really try to get those contractions back together. And the great thing with that is at that point you're producing colostrum. You can have the hospital store your colostrum for you. So you have extra for the baby. So if for some reason their blood sugars are low, or if they're like, oh, like these numbers are off, we really need to give them formula or whatever it is, you have your colostrum there for them to use. So breast pump is a great way to keep things moving and movement. So those are two ways that you can combat the labor stall that you hear of with an epidural. So let's talk about maybe what happens if you have a low platelet count, you don't get your epidural in time, you're fifth in line, whatever it is, for some reason, you don't get the epidural. What are some other options? So let's say they're like, hey, you need to get this bag of fluids, and the anesthesiologist is stuck in a cesarean. What you can ask for, this is why it's so important in prenatal appointments to have a birthing plan and to talk with your provider about your options, because you can say, yes, epidural, and your doctor's like, cool, great. Ask your provider, so what happens if I can't get the epidural? What other tools do you have that I could use for pain relief? One is going to be IV pain medication. You can only use this at a certain point in labor. So if you are refusing cervical exams, they're going to really want to check you, because if you're past a certain point, they're not going to want to do the IV medication because it does get into baby's system and they don't want the baby to be sleepy when they are born. It's kind of a tool to use earlier in labor. Another thing that you can ask is if your hospital or birthing center carries nitrous oxide. Nitrous oxide is laughing gas. That can be a great way to get through your contractions. A lot of these stories that I even hear, like when the epidural's not working great and this and that, they forget that there's other options there. They're just like, my epidural's not working and this sucks, instead of being like, hey, can I have some laughing gas? The only thing with that is that you kind of have to time it right to make sure that you're inhaling before you're getting to the peak of the contraction to really get that relief. As with everything, there's side effects. There's pros and cons and risks and benefits. Another pain relief option I'm going to talk about is non-medicalized ones. So there's the TENS unit, where you have those little electrode patches that you can put on. You'd have to bring your own. The hospital does not provide those. I know a lot of doulas carry them, so that's something that you could talk to your doula about as well. There's acupressure and acupuncture. Acupuncture, obviously, in labor, You're not going to have an acupuncturist probably come to wherever you're birthing. If you have a friend who does that and they're coming there, that's amazing. But learning some acupressure points, having your partner learn them before you go into labor could help. But let me talk about the two things that are going to be key if you cannot get an epidural. I know I mentioned movement with an epidural, but I want to talk about it without an epidural. So getting up, getting into different positions around the room. Use your hospital room for different positions. So laboring on the side of the bed, being on the ball on the floor, sitting on the toilet is an amazing position to labor in. I know that it might not feel like fun, but that is a great position to get a baby to turn, to rotate, to move in. It's really, really great for labor. It's a tool that us doulas use a lot. You can sit forward on the toilet, or one of my favorite is actually facing backwards on the toilet. You put the pillows up over the back of the toilet. They can lean on it, sit on the toilet, labor there for 5 contractions. Try to do at least a few there. I know it's uncomfortable. And then you can move into different positions. So movement is going to be a big way to reduce pain and to cope. There's actually some great research on that as well. And then the other one I'm going to suggest for pain relief without an epidural is hydrotherapy. Hydrotherapy is huge. I know not every hospital has laboring tubs, but if they do, the tubs can work magic. And there's actual research on that as well. So, getting into a warm bath can be very, very soothing, can really, really help. And if your hospital does not have a bathtub, use the shower. So, get in the shower, and one great thing that you can do in the shower is set up a little station, ask for a birthing ball, get on your knees, put your upper body on the birthing ball, then have your partner take the shower head and just spray the water over your back and forth. That is so relaxing, so smooth, like so soothing. The pressure of it feels great, the warmth of it feels great. Even using like a cold washcloth on the back of your neck while you're in the warm tub or in a warm shower is so, so helpful. So, movement and hydrotherapy are going to be huge. I don't see enough people taking advantage of the shower in a hospital. They think hydrotherapy tub, but the shower is so, so great. It can work magic. You can really work through a lot that you are, trying to get through your contractions there. So yeah, those are my tips for you guys. Like I said, I know not, I mean, a huge percentage of people are wanting epidurals, but it's just not always going to happen. So it's important for me to give you information to equip yourself to know how to handle it and to know that you have other options in these situations where they're like, okay, well, we can't get you one yet. And you're like, okay, well, I'm going to try these other tools to get through. So, another thing that I just want to talk about quick before I wrap up is just kind of our perception around pain. I think that we've made childbirth to be really scary and really painful. And I'm definitely not somebody who says childbirth is pain free. I've talked to people, I've known people who have said that they have had pain free births, they laughed their babies out. They didn't experience any pain. I know there's accounts on it, there's courses on it. That has never happened for me. I have always experienced painful childbirth, but I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that we are so scared of pain, but pain is inevitable. It's going to happen in our life. And this is not me trying to talk you out of getting an epidural. I'm just saying in general, because you might not be able to get it, right? So you got to switch that mindset. If you're focused on, I need this epidural, but it's not going to happen, you need to be able to switch that mindset and know that you are powerful, that you are strong, and that pain, it's in our mind. I know that it hurts. I'm like laughing because I'm like, yeah, try telling yourself that, Liz, when you're pushing out your last baby. But it's inevitable. Pain is going to happen in life and it's so temporary, but you can get past it and you can get through it. And that's like suffering through it versus surrendering through it is huge. That's such a huge mindset shift. So even if you're planning on getting the epidural, do things to start preparing your mind to get through labor and delivery. Start doing meditations, guided meditations. I'll link my favorite ones down in the show notes. I love the Built to Birth. Her guided meditations are great. She has them for pregnancy, through labor. So start doing things to prepare your mind to know that like you are strong, you are powerful, you were made to do this. Your body's going to birth the perfect baby for your body. And repeat these affirmations over yourself. Have certain affirmations that you're bringing in with you into labor, and then have these tools to bring in with you too, just in case for some reason that epidural does not happen the way that you want it to. Because yeah, I think it's like 85% are going for that epidural, and it's not always happening. So it's so important to have these other tools to know how to get through your labor um, and to even make the most of it, make the most of your birth and feel like, okay, not everything's happening to me now. I'm helpless because I can't get the epidural. It's like, all right, what tools can I use? And get your partner on board with those so they know, like, hey, babe, when I'm in labor, I'm planning to get the epidural. If for some reason that doesn't happen, here's what I need you to do. I need you to remind me how strong I am. I need you to remind me to move my body. I need you to help get me into different positions. I need you to speak these affirmations over me. I need you during every single contraction to tell me to drop my shoulders, relax my face, sink into it, surrender my body, whatever that is. And also, I need you to be okay when I tell you to shut up because because sometimes that happens in labor, but you have to be able to have that communication with your partner to so they know how to best help you through it as well. So I know I just like dumped a whole lot in here. I just really wanted to speak about this because it is really important. We're not given enough of our options in labor, and even all the births that I'm at, like I mentioned earlier, when it's like, oh well, your epidural's not working, or oh you didn't get it in time. It wasn't like, oh well, let's use these other tools. Like nobody was bringing that up. Just me, the doula, who's like, okay, like let's try these other things. And to try to help. So we need to make sure that you're equipped with these tools. You know what your options are, that you've had this conversation with your provider, and that you feel prepared going in. That's also why you have to join my waitlist for my course that's coming out. I actually go into detail into all of these pain relief options, plus other ones in there, linked with tons of research, and a ton more research on the epidural. I have a video just dedicated to that, solely on pros, cons, risks, benefits, all the research behind it. And I want you guys to have that information. So the course will be coming out soon. Join the waitlist, grab my first trimester guide, survival guide, to have on hand as well. I'm also linking in the show notes a couple of my affiliate links. As you've noticed, I'm doing less and less ads on the podcast. I will probably have like a few more throughout the year, but I'm doing less and less ads and just kind of relying more on the companies that I just love and trust and support. And also my course that I've been pouring my heart and soul into as well. And so I'm going to be linking in the show notes my absolute favorite prenatal brand, which is Needed. I take a ton of their supplements. They have stress support as well, and cognitive support, which is huge for that mom brain that I'm using now. But their prenatal is my absolute favorite. Vito also takes their men's multivitamin as well. And our whole family takes their immunity boost. So they have a lot of options. You can get 20% off with my code with that. Also, a lot of people ask me about childbirth education as far as like wanting to become a doula. What's the best program to do? And that is by far Kylie Banks, her doulapreneur method. And she is amazing. She teaches you how to not only be a doula, but how to have a doula business. She sets you up for success in how to take your passion and to help people, and to be able to pour your heart and soul into it, and to be able to walk away from your other job that's supporting you through that journey. She really takes your hand and walks you through it. So I have an affiliate link with her. I've taken some of her courses and just blown out of the water by what she teaches in her heart and her passion for that as well. So make sure you check those out. I will include all of that in the show notes, and stay tuned for the amazing episodes that are going to be coming out. And look out for the course. I'm so excited for it to drop soon.